Hello, today we're going to be rebuilding a Kanger Protank head. Now I know I've done this video before, but I've experimented lately and I found a much better way to do it. And this is the way I've been using for the last year or so. A lot of my friends use the Kanger Protanks. They're very popular. Also the EVODs can be rebuilt exactly the same way. So today we will be using sugar and cream worsted cotton yarn. And you can find this at nearly any craft store, and you can of course find it online. We will be doing this in order to improve the wicking of the Kanger Protank heads and allow you to reuse them, because most of the people I know just buy these and use them and throw them away. Now, when you get these from the factory, they use silica wick, and silica is an okay wicking material. It's very heat resistant, and if you run it dry, it's not going to burn. However, it doesn't have the wicking ability that cotton has, and today we are going to do cotton, and this will allow you to go up to 12 or 15 watts on one of these Kanger Protank heads. Now, before we start, the first thing you ought to do is wash your hands. Make sure your hands are good and clean, because any contamination or oils on your fingers are going to affect the flavor if you don't wash your hands. And the second thing is we want to make sure, absolutely sure, that we're using a genuine Kanger head. The reason we want to use the Protank heads and not an EVOD head is primarily the size of the opening. As you see, the Kanger heads for the Protank have a much larger opening than the EVODs, and they also have a longer chimney. So let's make sure that we start with that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open the head. Now this is a new one. This works the same way with the used ones. And what you want to do is you want to find the wicks and place them vertical. And then you put the base up to the first wide section there between your thumb and forefinger. Some people use tools to do this, but I find that with a little minor hand strength you can pop these open by hand. And the second thing is we're just going to grab the chimney in your hand. So then you just bend a little bit, and just the motion is going to be just like breaking it. And it'll pop right open. It requires very little strength at all, but you can also use pliers. The first thing you'll notice when you pop these open is it's going to have a couple of flavor wicks laying on top, and we'll just go ahead and remove those. Now then, we're going to disassemble the bottom. If you turn it over, you'll see that we have the base. We have a white little bit of silicone or rubber insulator, depending on the model you have, and then you'll have a center pin. So to get it disassembled, we just grab the center pin between our fingernails and give a little tug, and out it comes. And you'll be left with the rubber insulator. You'll see some wires sticking out. So you'll just take your fingernails, and you don't need real long ones, but you'll just want to pinch that and pull. And out will come the rubber, in this case silicone insulator. And sometimes the wick and wire will come out. Other times you'll have to pop it out the front. So we'll set our parts here, make sure we don't use them, or don't lose them, and lay them out. So now that we've got it all taken apart, the next thing we want to do is we'll want to take off a new piece of wire and anneal it. And if you've seen my other videos, you'll know that annealing the wire does a couple things for us. First, it burns off impurities, and second, it's going to soften the wire to make it easier to work. So we're just going to cut off a little piece of wire here. This can be done with simply a pair of nail clippers. However, I tend to use thumb scissors and diagonal cutters, but once again, the nail clippers, a good sharp pair of nail clippers, can be substituted for both of these tools. So now that we've got the wire cut off a decent length, 4 inches or so, we're going to grab just a regular old lighter and heat it until it's cherry red. We'll want to let it be red for a second or two, and it's going to cool down gradually, and this will make it much easier to work, and it'll also help you work kinks out of the wire as well. Alright, now we have our wire annealed, and we're going to need a wrapping guide. Now this is a 1.75 millimeter knitting needle that I've cut in half, and you can also get that at the craft store. I think they're made by Sarah Bates, and this one is made of anodized aluminum. Just cut it right in two. So you want to leave yourself about an inch of tag laying at the bottom, and for this 30 gauge wire that we're using, I like to use about 8 wraps. So we're going to make 8 wraps on this, and we're just going to lay them right alongside each other as close as we can get them. There we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we want to lay these close together. We want to make sure that they don't overlap or cross each other, because that could cause a short. But once the process of annealing the wire also puts a little bit of carbon buildup on the outside of the wire, which will keep it from shorting across the turns. So we'll pull it off, and we notice that we're pretty even. We're pretty nice looking here. We're just going to squeeze it a little bit. Since these Kanger Protank heads can't be dry burned after we put them in, we just want to squeeze them together until we have them. And if they're not staying together, you can simply just heat the wire up a little bit, and that will cause the wire to relax into its new position. And if you like, you can take a pair of pliers or something and then just kind of give it a little squeeze there. Now, it doesn't have to be sitting completely monolithic, but the closer together they are, the better off you'll be. So now, once we've got the coil made, I usually make several of these at a time, and you can store them in a little Ziploc bag or whatever. Once we've got the coil back on the length of knitting needle here, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off the tag ends of these turns a little bit, because it'll be easier to work with. There we go. So now it's time to put the coil back into the base. So we take the base and we look at it. We notice we have 2 notches and just a hole right down through the middle. So what we want to do is we want to feed both legs of the coil right down through that central hole and set the knitting needle, our guide, right through the 2 notches. This will make sure that they're aligned properly when it comes time to place the wick in here, and it'll make sure that we don't go too far up or too far down when we do it. So once it's through, we want to grab and tug gently on the leads coming out, and we'll just pick one, it doesn't matter which one, and we'll fold it right over the side and as back against that as closely as possible. This will become our negative lead because it's going to be attached to the outside, and we'll leave our center lead, which will become our positive, sticking straight out. Now the next step to install is to take our insulator. Now if your insulator is dry, it's going to be difficult to get in there, so you just put just a tiny little bit of e-liquid on here and roll it in your fingers, and that will lubricate it and help it go in easier. So you'll notice that the ring on one side is slightly larger than the other. We'll want to put the small end on first, and we will place it over the lead that we left. Put it straight up here, and then you just, with your thumbnail, you just work it in all the way around and give it a little push, and it'll snap right in. Now our remaining lead, once again, we'll do the exact same thing. We'll give it a little tug to make sure that it's seated properly, and then we'll just bend it right around over the insulator. And now it's time to install your center pin and push it in snug. You don't have to push it in real tight or anything. So there we go. We've got the hard part is done. So now we can withdraw our guide rod, and we notice the coil. If you look down, it's sitting nicely in the channel there. We want to make sure it's not up too high, because when you put this chimney back in place, you'll want to make sure that it doesn't short against that. There is a cup there. So now that we have this done, we have to trim the leads, and you'll want to trim these as closely as possible. This is where a good sharp pair of cutters or nail clippers come in really handy, because we want to cut that off just as absolutely as close to the insulator as we can. Any remaining wire may cause a short, and we definitely don't want that. And there we go. The base is now complete. You'll want to look down there and look at your coil, and if it isn't quite centered, you can just take a toothpick or your your guide rod and just push it over to where it's as centered as possible inside the cup. Now the next step is very simple. We just have to add the wicking material in and put the cap back on. So take a section about 2 inches long and cut it off. Now in order to get this through here, a lot of people have problems doing this, and I found the best way to do this is to take your wick and put a good sized drop of e-liquid on one end, just right on the end of it there. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll this, and this will help it pack down. Just squeeze it tightly between your thumb and forefinger and roll it. And you want to do this for about 1/4 of an inch on the end of the wick. You want to go all the way down because we want this wick to be nice and fluffy, because that's when it's going to wick the best. But by rolling it tightly between your thumb and forefinger, it'll be able to slide right through that coil there. You want to pull it through until you get to the dry, fluffy part. And there we are. So the next thing we're going to need is some flavor wicks. There's a lot of people that say don't use them, but I believe that they impart a better flavor to the head. So what we can do is we'll just take and we'll trim off a little section at the end here. And we're going to use 2 flavor wicks. Now this worsted cotton yarn, it actually has 4 strands in it, and we're just going to pull all 4 of those strands apart. Don't just untwist them. Make sure you pull them completely apart, because they'll have a tendency to stay twisted together, and we definitely want them to be separate. And now we have our flavor wicks that we're going to add to the top. So if you're going to be using these within a few weeks, what I do is I go ahead and I pre-moisten the wicks. Now cotton, when you first wet it, it doesn't wick as good as it does after a few minutes or a couple hours or a few days. So I like to moisten the wick with e-liquid to get that process kick-started. So when I go to put it in my atomizer, it'll be ready to use right away. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll just take 2 of these wicks, these flavor wicks that we've made, and we'll just lay them right across the top. Make sure that they're straight, they're not twisted around each other, and that they're laying against the top of the coil. And what that does, in my opinion, is it increases the surface area of wick to coil, allowing you to get more vapor and more flavor out of the same size coil. Now that we've got them laying in there, we don't have any gaps, nothing like that. We want to make sure we still get airflow around the sides, that it's not, they're not stuck around the outside. And we simply press fit the chimney back into place. You want to go all the way around, make sure that it's seated well, and that it's on the top of the base straight, and then we just put the cap right back down where it goes. So our build is basically complete. Now all we have to do is just trim off the excess. And what you want to do is you'll take your thumb scissors or your clippers or your nail clippers, and you'll just lay it right along the widest part of the edge of the base and clip straight up, leaving just the tiniest little tuft sticking out. And if there's a little extra, we'll trim them up, make them look pretty. There we go. So there you have it. We've completely rebuilt a Kanger Protank head. Now when you put it in your tank, you give it a few minutes to sit and get nice and saturated, and you can run easily, like I said, 10, 12, 15 watts out of these, where before with the stock heads you can only run about 7 or 7.5. You'll get much better vapor and much better flavor. Flavor actually that rivals the Kayfun tanks. In some instances it's better. You won't get quite the vapor output that you do out of a Kayfun, but man, will this taste far better than you're used to off of the stock heads. Thank you for watching.